You're crouched under a rock overhang in what is now southern France, roughly 40,000 years ago. Rain slices in sideways. The only wall between you and the storm is stone that broke that way on its own, long before you were born, with none of your effort in it. Right now, you're probably indoors, four walls someone measured and cut on purpose, a roof engineered to shed exactly this kind of rain. Maybe a mortgage attached to the whole arrangement, or a landlord, or both, and a thermostat that fixes the temperature without asking anything of you at all. None of that existed for most of human history. Not the walls, not the roof, not even the idea that shelter was something a person could own instead of something a person had to earn again every single day. So, how did people survive tens of thousands of years without a single house anyone built on purpose? In 1989, archaeologist Danny Nadel was working near the Sea of Galilee in Israel when a drought pulled the water back and exposed something odd on the lake bed. It was Ohalo 2, a fishing camp roughly 23,000 years old, preserved not by dry desert air, but by mud and water that sealed it off from oxygen for millennia. Six oval huts stood there, framed from brush and branches, some no wider than roughly 10 feet across. Inside one, researchers found grass bedding that still held its woven shape after more than 20,000 years underwater. This wasn't a lucky cave someone stumbled into during a storm. Somebody built this, on purpose, from nothing but plants and effort and the knowledge of which grass would hold. So if people were already constructing huts 23,000 years ago, why do we still picture cavemen huddled in rock shelters? Everyone assumes cave dwelling was the default setting for ancient life. The truth is, usable caves are rare. Dry, defensible, roomy caverns aren't spread evenly across a continent, and most bands of humans live their entire lives without ever finding one nearby. They built their own instead. Around 15,000 years ago, in what's now Mesorich, Ukraine, a group of people solved the shelter problem with a resource nobody today would think to reach for: the dead. Researcher Ivan Podopliko documented the excavation of structures built almost entirely out of mammoth bone, skulls stacked into a circular base, tusks arched overhead like ribs on a rebuilt skeleton. One dwelling alone was built from an estimated 20 tons of mammoth bone, pulled from the remains of dozens of animals. That's not a shelter you throw together in an afternoon. That's architecture assembled from a creature most people alive today have only ever seen behind museum glass. Here's where it gets strange, though. Everyone pictures a mammoth bone hut as a one-time emergency fix, something built once in a crisis and abandoned. Wear patterns on the bones tell a different story. Repair marks, replaced sections, structures reused across multiple seasons, maybe multiple generations. This wasn't a tent. It functioned closer to a house passed down. Not every group needed anything that permanent, though, and some still don't. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe spent years living alongside the Hadza people of northern Tanzania, one of the last groups on Earth who still built shelter roughly the way most humans did, for nearly all of history. His fieldwork, published in 2010, documented Hadza camps relocating every few weeks. With grass and branch huts a single family could raise in a matter of hours. Nobody there treats a shelter like a lifetime investment. It behaves less like a mortgage and more like a jacket, built fast, used hard, abandoned without ceremony the moment the food nearby runs out. Everyone assumes temporary means primitive, a lesser version of a real house. Actually, for a species that survives by following food across the seasons, a structure you can abandon in 10 minutes isn't a compromise. It's the correct engineering choice. Shelter was never only about walls, anyway. It was about heat, and that part of the story goes back even further than any hut. At Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, archaeologist Francesco Berna and his colleagues identified burned plant ash and bone fragments dated to roughly 1 million years ago, among the earliest solid evidence of controlled fire use anywhere on Earth. A contained fire like that can raise the air temperature inside a small enclosed space by dozens of degrees within minutes. Walls blocked the wind. Fire did everything else. But there's a problem with picturing any of this as cozy. Even a windbreak and a fire couldn't travel with a body across open ground. And open ground is exactly where heat disappears fastest. The most portable shelter humans ever built wasn't made of stone, brush, or bone at all. It was worn. In 2003, geneticist Mark Stoneking and his colleagues compared the DNA of head lice against body lice, a species that could only have evolved once humans started wearing clothing it could live inside of. Their calculations placed the origin of clothing somewhere between roughly 70,000 and 170,000 years ago. A single layer of animal hide, worn correctly, can cut heat loss by more than half compared to bare skin in cold air. Clothing was a house a person carried on their back, rebuilt fresh every morning. So the honest answer to how ancient humans survived without houses was never one invention. It was four, stacked on top of each other. Read the land for stone that already broke the wind in the right direction. Build something fast and disposable where nothing natural was available. Keep a fire burning at the center of whatever structure existed that week. Wrap the body itself in a shelter small enough to walk around in. None of that needed a blueprint. None of it needed 30 years of payments. What it needed was constant attention, moving with the seasons, repairing what wore thin, teaching a child which grass held its shape when woven tight, and which grass just fell apart in the rain, which animal's bone would bear weight, and which would crack under it. Get any one of those wrong often enough, and the cost wasn't an uncomfortable night. The real invention was never the house. It was the knowledge of how to keep building one, over and over, out of whatever the land happened to offer that particular week. Go back to that overhang in southern France, rain still slicing in sideways, stone doing a job nobody built it to do. Whoever sat there wasn't waiting to be rescued by architecture. They already knew how to stay warm, how to stay dry, how to sleep safely, using materials that would rot, burn out, or wash downriver within a single season. Today, the walls stay standing whether anyone tends them or not, and that convenience quietly erased a skill that used to define an entire life. The skill of being someone a shelter could actually depend on. A house doesn't need you. That overhang, that fire, that hide wrapped tight against the cold, those needed you every single day. And that need was the entire reason they worked.